Hey guys, it's Chris and welcome back to another Dead by Daylight video. Today we're going to do something a bit different. We're going to do a new survivor's guide. So this will be the top 5 tips, actually a few bonus tips, so be sure to stick around to the end. So more like 7 tips, but we're calling it the top 5 tips of brand new survivors. Now this again will apply to mostly fairly new, brand new survivors, but some things may apply to some people who have been playing for a while, some things you didn't think of as it offers some different perspectives. So be sure to stick around to the end for the bonus tips, really important. So let's jump right in. Tip number 1, get the fuck over the terror radius, otherwise known as the heartbeat. Just because you hear the terror radius doesn't mean the killer sees you. When you freak out over the heartbeat, this causes panic, this causes missing skill checks, this causes you running away from the generator, for example, then getting seen because you wasn't actually seen in the first place. So you just have to get to the point where you're not worried about the heartbeat anymore. It doesn't mean the killer actually sees you. And of course, as a beginning survivor, you will miss a lot of skill checks. Of course, at first, you're going to get used to that. Over time, you'll miss less and less. Even the best players in the world today still occasionally miss skill checks. So don't make that a big deal. After a while, you'll get the hang of those, especially when the heart beats around you, because that's when you tend to panic and miss more skill checks. Consider using brand new survivor perks like Technician. This will stop the generator from blowing up if you do miss a skill check. But once you get used to skill checks and the terror radius and all that good stuff, I would seriously dump that as far as a perk, and don't waste a perk slot on something like Technician, which is clearly built for brand new players who are just now getting used to the game and skill checks themselves. Another thing I'll add is you could use something like Spine Chill. That's a great perk. People still use Spine Chill that's been playing for 4, 5, 6 years. Spine Chill will light up in the corner when the killer's looking in your direction. Now again, that doesn't mean he actually sees you, just means he's looking your way. But if that little kitty cat in the corner stays fucking lit up, or it's blinking but it stays essentially lit, that probably does mean the killer is at least heading your direction and possibly has actual eyes on you. Number 2, remember you leave scratch marks when you run, and sometimes, in my case, they still lead directly to lockers. Now you have to remember, scratch marks show up for about 3 to 4 seconds, and of course there's a couple perks to killer like Predator, for example, that may last a little longer, although that's very rare. Scratch marks do kind of give you away in the sense if the killer is nearby and sees them, but if he is across the map, you don't have to worry about scratch marks. But what I was going to say about scratch marks, as far as you leaving scratch marks when you run, is learn to use them to your advantage and give the killer misinformation. The killer's always looking for some type of information. That's what explosions are for when you miss skill checks. That's what disturbed crows are for. That's what perks are for, to give some kind of information on where the survivors are if he's not currently in chase. So you can learn to use those for misdirection by, for example, running past something, keeping your scratch marks going for a little bit, and then doubling back and walking maybe around an obstacle or a corner, whatever, and then the killer comes by, they're following scratch marks, and they keep going, but you've already doubled back the other way, and now you're the hell up out of there, and you made a lot of distance. I would suggest something like Fixated, now called Self-Aware. I don't know why they changed the name. Learn this for a little while to see how you actually leave scratch marks when you run, and learn how to manipulate your scratch marks to throw off the killer. So learn your scratch marks, but again, with Fixated or Self-Aware, that's something I would use for a little while and then kind of dump it. Don't waste a perk slot on it. You'll kind of get the idea of how you scratch marks will look even though you can't see them. So you'll be able to kind of use that to your advantage to misinform the killer as you're in chase. And number 3, and one of the most important tips for brand new survivors, stay the fuck on generators. Your primary goal is to do 5 generators and open a damn door and run the hell out. That's your primary goal. Your secondary objectives are like totems or whatever, but primarily you want to stay on generators. You don't want to be unnecessarily hiding, especially when the killer's across the map, or hiding in lockers, or doing totems. And again, I'm not saying don't ever do totems. There is a time and place for that. Maybe you're looking for NOED. Maybe you're trying to prevent NOED. Just remember, there's now perks like Hex Pentimento where they can actually see that. There's perks like Hex Undying where a killer can actually see your aura when you walk within a certain distance of a totem. So all those things are fine, but they're all secondary next to generators. Your thing is to stay on generators as efficiently as possible and the most time as possible. Remember, once the generator is done, it cannot be undone. You may consider using a perk such as Deja Vu to find the next generator closest to you after you complete one. That'll help you kind of get the idea. But once you get used to map layouts, where generators typically spawn, all that good stuff, I would certainly dump that perk and not waste a perk slot on it, because you kind of at that point generally know. But the primary goal is to do gens, so stay on gens as long as possible. Don't waste time doing other things. But just a quick little tip on that as well, be sure not to 3-gen yourselves. Make sure you're not doing every generator on one side of the map and then leaving the other side of the map with 1 or 2 generators left. Then all of a sudden the killer has what's called a 3 or 4-gen, and that means that the remaining generators, 1 or 2 you have left, are all in one little tight cluster together, and that killer can now then patrol that area very easily and keep you off those generators and eventually catch most of you or the remainder of the players. So be sure to stay on gens as efficiently as possible, but don't do them all in the same area. And number 4, stop fucking walking around when the killer's not even close to you. Yes, as we talked about, you do leave scratch marks, but only for 3 or 4 seconds. You don't have to worry about those being there by the time the killer gets there if he's across the map or really far away from you. Run from generator to generator, or run wherever you need to be going when you can. Yes, there's a time and place for walking or whatever, so you don't leave scratch marks, and so the killer doesn't hear your footsteps, all that good stuff as well. But if the killer is not around you or in another chase or whatever it may be, fucking run to your next objective, which should be the next generator. Remember, the overall goal of Survivors is to speed up the game as much as possible, to put as much pressure on the killer as possible, and the goal of the killer is to slow down the game so he has more time to kill you. But I would always recommend something like Iron Will, which is still arguably one of the best, if not the best perk in the game. That's something I still use to this day. It makes it much easier to evade chases. If you're going for a flashlight saves, you can sneak up on the killer if you're injured because he can't hear you. He can still obviously hear your footsteps. Do remember, the killers use sound just as much as sight to find out where you are. But again, if he's in another chase, he's not near you, you know his general direction or whatever, fucking run to the next generator. Don't waste 20 seconds walking from gen to gen when that's another 20 or 30 seconds you could be actually doing a fucking gen. And number 5, look back when you're running from the fucking killer. You have to be sure to look back at the killer to see where he is at all times. It doesn't mean the entire time, but it just means occasionally glancing back over your shoulder at least to find out where the hell he is. If you keep running with the camera straight at your back in that third-person POV, you're just waiting to be blinked on top of, you're waiting for a hatchet to come straight at you, you're waiting for knives to hit you in the back without breaking line of sight, whatever it may be, and you're going to get mind games. So, for example, you're just running, you learn to run around some things, you're running around T-walls and L-walls or whatever and tiles, and all of a sudden you run straight into the killer because you didn't look back to see that he had doubled back and went the other way, and now you're actually running towards him. And by the way, speaking of running from the killer, don't be afraid to get in a chase. That's the most fun part of the game, and that's how you get better. You could consider running something like Windows of Opportunity. This is something I still run all the time because some of these maps are really dark, but you can see, nearby pallets and windows, all that good stuff as well. And essentially what you want to do as a survivor, not to get into this too deep, this is a whole separate video on how to kind of loop, but you're running from loop to loop. So Windows of Opportunity really helps with that. Even if you are an experienced player, a lot of people still run this because it makes your pathing a lot easier as far as your plans, because you should be trying to learn to loop around things and then go eventually drop a pallet and then run on to the next pallet, of course, or whatever, next loop. And that's essentially what you're trying to do as a survivor. You're trying to extend that chase time as long as possible so your primary objective, tip number 3, generators, are getting done. And the number 6 bonus tip, and maybe number 7 bonus tip. Don't immediately run to the hook to save your damn teammates. You have 60 seconds, a total of 2 minutes per help state on that hook. When you're first hooked, the first time you're hooked in a game, you have 60 seconds just to hang there. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to hit skill checks. Stay on that generator, but while your teammate hangs there for 20 or 30 seconds before you run over and get them off the hook. Now, leave yourself plenty of time to make sure they don't go to second state, for example, but stay on that gen. Again, generators are the primary objective, and if you spend that extra 20 or 30 seconds on that generator, that's 20 or 30 seconds of progress, maybe even a completed gen that you've done before you go unhook. And the other thing that's really important with that as well is it gives the killer plenty of time to leave the area. Don't be one of those survivors who runs over to the hook and immediately unhooks your teammate with the killer still in the area, and then be surprised when he turns around and then hits you and your teammate back down on the ground again just to be hooked for the second time, and then be in the in-game chat calling him a tunneler and a camper. You went and kind of farmed your teammate off the hook when he was right there. You did it way too early, so he had no other choice but to turn around and smack you and possibly your teammate again. That's what he's supposed to do as a damn killer. So don't unhook too early. Give him a chance to leave the area, and that gives you a chance to unhook your teammate safely and even get a heal off, whatever it may be. But spend that extra time on generators as much as possible. And just one more really quick pro tip, speaking of hooks, don't fucking kill yourself on hook. When you're a brand new survivor, again, you have 60 seconds to hang there before you have to struggle, and then you have another 60 seconds to struggle before you have to die. So don't try to get off the hook when you first get hooked. There's plenty more game left to play. Somebody will come get you. Sometimes it doesn't happen, I understand, in solo queues. Sometimes you get hooked one time and you sit there and nobody ever shows up because they're all scared. And again, I understand that happens from time to time. You get hooked and nobody ever comes for you, and you sit there and you go to second state, or maybe even you die on first hook. That does happen occasionally. but for the most part, somebody will come unhook you because they're trying to get points too. But of course, on the other side of that coin is there's no need for 2 or 3 other survivors to come running at the hook at the same time. Maybe you consider running something like Bond so everybody can see everybody and know what each other's doing. Remember, essentially the whole game of Survivor is a rotation of chases. While I'm in a chase, my other 3 teammates should be doing gens. Maybe I get hooked, one teammate should come unhook me while the other 2 are on gens, and the killer's looking for the next person to chase. So it's essentially just a rotation of trading chases and hooks to waste the killer's time while other people do gens. And if you keep that in mind and do gens efficiently, before you know it, they'll all be done, the door will be open, and the killer will be standing there watching you leave at the exit gates, wondering why he plays this game in the first place. Anyway, guys, that's all I have for today. I hope that helps a few people out there in the Survivor world, maybe even some more seasoned survivors are not thinking about some of these concepts. Also, be sure to check out the Don't Tunnel Me Bro podcast with me and Mazuma 10,000 on this very channel. And again, you can catch me on Twitch at twitch.tv/smokescreenvids on Mondays and Thursdays, and sometimes Fridays and Saturdays as well. I'm live over there playing DBD every single week. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.